Patients are speaking, but is healthcare really listening? Well, it turns out that companies and providers that do are outpacing competitors that don't. Adam Cherrington from KLAS Research joins me on camera to share what he heard firsthand at their recent patient experience symposium and why ignoring the patient voice isn't just a miss, it sends a clear negative message. Let's get to it.
Sway help.
Adam, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Colin. Great to see you.
It's always a pleasure to see you, my friend. And like we were talking before, it's a little unfortunate we haven't seen as much of each other at the various conferences, but we always have great conversations. I'm looking so forward to today to talk about the patient experience symposium that you put on not too long ago by KLAS. And from everything I've heard, it was a wonderful event.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's as you know better than most, it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to put these things together. But there's a lot of passion. I'm not just talking about from KLAS, but especially the community. There's such an abundance and willingness to share and collaborate and grow and improve healthcare. So I hope we contributed to that in some way.
Well, for the benefit of our audience who may be not as familiar with it, Adam, can you describe the symposium for us?
Yeah, you bet. So this is probably the fourth or fifth iteration we've had of what we're calling the Patient and Consumer Innovation Summit, meaning, and it is a symposium. It's an effort to bring in insights that can be shared, and it's truly to improve healthcare, which meets the mission of KLAS. And we call it patient and consumer because we have to listen to both. We don't get too caught up on, hey, am I a patient or am I a human or am I a consumer, a member? Yeah, we're talking the same individual, but the effort is there to make sure that let's innovate, let's collaborate, let's listen to patients and make sure that their voice is heard. And so in April of this year, we got together. We intentionally started with a panel of patients because if you're going to have a patient summit, you better have some patients in the room. And Colin, I'm a big advocate of the idea that yes, we're all patients, but no, we can't assume we know what patients want just because we are patients. Like any good marketing principle, you must remove yourself from the seat of the consumer or the customer, if you will. And so we started with a panel of patients. And one of my favorite moments was when they started to collaborate. They started to kind of ignore the audience and start to share among themselves. And there was one example, your listeners will know Erica Olinsky, big fan of Erica. In fact, she left our event to go to your event, which was great. She was able to participate in both. But she started giving examples where she's used AI tools to summarize her patient portal and results and test results. And the other panelists started to say, oh, can you send that to me? That sounds super interesting. And so this concept of a patient's needs are different than the clinician's needs. Both are important. Both must be solved for. But isn't it interesting that we tend to overlook the key stakeholder? We tend to assume we know what they want and forego their opinion or perspective or even participation on technology to some degree. So, just looking back, really happy how it turned out. I'm a fan of the collaboration in healthcare, as I've already mentioned, and it was a great chance to hopefully elevate the awareness of let's listen to patients. Let's make sure their voice is included.
Yeah, and you have a real nice mix of attendees at your symposium, right? You have, like you said, you have patients, you have provider organizations, you have vendors, you have experts. So it's a really unique kind of audience there. And you're right. I mean, I certainly enjoyed the times I've been there where there's a lot of sharing that goes on. The panels are all great. So yeah, I mean, then from what Erica was explaining to me and from some of the other people I bumped into since then, they all describe the symposium as wonderful. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Maybe I do have a follow-on question though for you, Adam. Like, why is the symposium so important to you personally, but also to KLAS? Like, why is it important to put on this type of event?
At the heart of everything we do in measuring technology, it's for the benefit of the patient. And I, I've spent the past few years finding ways to make sure the patient's perspective is amplified. Um, and it just really resonates with me that you might have the best technology in the world. It might be exactly solving challenges and producing outcomes, but if it's not adopted, if it's not delivered in a way that's important to patients, does it matter? I hope so. I hope it does. But it's really unique that in healthcare, we just make those assumptions. Can you imagine if Nike just said, "Well, I'm going to just create the kind of shoe that I think Colin would like, and he's going to like this color and this size and this this type of shoe." You may be a runner, and they say, "Well, you're going to be a mountain climber. Here, put these on." Um, so to me, it's very important because this is the heart of what healthcare technology is about. And I love the aha moments that come when we decide, let's listen to patients, let's include them. Let's have a patient family advisory council of maybe not a dozen, but maybe thousands. And can we truly do that? Yeah, we can. So I think it's the heart of healthcare. I think it matters to all of us individually and in our families and neighbors and friends. We've all had a healthcare journey, and we're all going to have healthcare journeys. And so, whenever I tell someone I'm in healthcare tech, without even mentioning digital health or patient engagement, they say, "Ah, I hope you're making it better because it's so frustrating when I have to do A, B, and C." It comes up immediately. So I just think there's so much good that we can still accomplish.
Yeah, no, and judging by the attendance you guys have had, it's clearly needed, right? People do want to come and they do want to engage. So, and you're right. I mean, without the patient, obviously, like, why are we here? So it's nice that you're elevating the patient voice through the symposium. Yeah, I gotta ask this though. It's been a few weeks, been a while actually since the conference, since both our conferences. Is there anything that in terms of a takeaway or an impression that's sticking with you through all this time, Adam, when you look back now at your event?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I mentioned the patient's desire for clarity and information. I kind of gave that example. That still continues to stick out to me. One of the panelists was my neighbor, who's a CIO for Salt Lake City. He's not in healthcare, but he deeply understands technology, and his family's had many healthcare journeys. And so, getting his perspective of just the willingness to be more open with his own privacy for the sake of simplicity, that stood out to me. It stood out to me just how important this work is, and I've kind of already explained that we really need to involve patients for that usability, adoption, and engagement, just to make sure that all the investment, the time and effort that goes into creation of these tools is not just wasted.
Mhm.
But one experience that really stands out from the summit, we had a fireside chat, and our founder, Kent Gale, who's been in the industry for decades, he interviewed Ed Marks, formerly of Cleveland Clinic, and Chris Ross, formerly of Mayo Clinic. And just these three pillars of the industry talking to each other was just a treat. Some of your listeners will know Ed and Chris, that they published a book called Diagnosed. And this really represented the point we were trying to make. From their experience in the industry, both of them have been on the provider side and the vendor side. They were these prominent leaders at these organizations as former CIOs. Both of them went through a cancer journey individually, and their paradigm shifted immediately.
Mm.
And so they learned firsthand the difference of being a patient versus being a provider versus being in the vendor seat. And so they talked about that, and they talked about their book Diagnosed. And we gave everybody a copy because the authors were right there. Um, that's kind of the point, that a patient is different. And may we always include them and invite them to the conversation. Chris gave an example where uh, when he was at Mayo,
Mhm.
they were having a hearty discussion, let's call it, if not even an argument of sorts, about cybersecurity and just paths they had to consider. And someone had the courage to raise their hand and say, "Why does this matter to the patient?" And it changed the tone of the meeting, the direction of the conversation. Something that we would look at and say, well, yeah, cybersecurity, hey, patient, don't you worry about it. We're going to just do this thing. And yes, patients don't walk into a hospital typically. Maybe these days they do with all the cybersecurity events we've had, and say, what's going on with cybersecurity here? But the point is, some of those decisions that we would assume, hey, patients don't need to be involved in this. Just that little effort to pay attention makes a huge difference. Um, I think it was Ed that gave an example of, it's okay to ask for a second opinion. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay as a patient to say, "Hey, I need you to explain this to me in a clear, concise way." A lot of patients don't know that. They think they just have to accept everything they're given. Um, so those things stood out to me, that it is important to understand the differences.
Yeah, and first of all, I love Ed Marks, and he's great. I mean, those three, you're right, are such pillars, and to have them all on the same stage, just to do a fireside and retelling of the stories. I mean, I wish I was a fly on the wall for that one. Um, but I like what you said there, Adam, because like I was just recently at the eHealth conference here in Toronto, and they had a record number of patient participants for the first time, right? They had over
Awesome.
60 patients, apply to be part of their scholarship program and everything. It was the first time they've gotten double digits kind of thing. And
Awesome.
what the general tone I got from them was, um, by seeing other patients at conferences and seeing that their voice was valued, gave them the courage to come forward and do what they now do, right? And so I don't know if you're getting this feeling. It sounds like you do. Like it's just so nice to see that there are so many more patients willing to share their stories and tell their side of the tale, and how that's bringing even more in, right? So I think there's this momentum that's building finally around this, where to your point, they're no longer as afraid to ask the question or to bring up something that may be bothering them, whereas before I think they would have just accepted it. I still think
Yeah.
that's the majority of the case, don't get me wrong, but at least there's more people willing to talk about their patient journeys, and they're being a patient advocate and lending their voice to the rising tide. So I like that.
Yeah. I like that too. And maybe in a future conversation, we could talk about the difference of generations. I think there's some generational characteristics where, uh, my teenage and adult children are very willing to ask questions and go learn and search. But my older parents, whatever the doctor says is gospel, and they go with it. Typically, there's anyway, that an episode for next time. But
Oh,
there's some
that's a whole
differences there.
podcast episode for you and I.
There you
But
go.
sort of on a related note, and based on what you saw at your symposium, where do you believe patient experience, patient engagement, advocacy, all of that is heading?
I am very happy to see some alignment happening. A few years ago, there was a huge gap between patients' desire for things like self-scheduling and patient intake, some of those tools that exist that have been slower to adoption. We're seeing that those are priorities for health systems now. So I hope the word here is alignment. And yes, it can always be better, but isn't it interesting that that is a priority? We're about to publish a report on priorities of health systems regarding digital health patient engagement. They're still talking and focusing on digital front door tools and access, and I applaud that. I think it's great, because that is also what patients want. We've done several projects where we've interviewed patients, and they're talking about communication. They're talking about scheduling. That continues to come up. I met with a vendor partner last week that was tracking inbound calls at one of their clients, at a hospital from one of their clients. Over 50% of the calls were all about scheduling. And that's not a huge surprise, but if you stop and think about it, that's significant. That this is the problem they're trying to solve, and so I am happy to see the alignment. I hope there's more of it.
I like it. I like that word that you used, alignment. And I'm encouraged that you're seeing it because you get to see more of the vendor and the community side than we do because we only see them at conferences. So it's cool that that seems to be happening. And you went there, so I'll just go there too. What are some of the other things that KLAS is working on in this sphere, like in terms of patient engagement, patient experience, the technologies? Is there anything that you're working? You mentioned the study. What else may be coming down the road?
We're also publishing a patient communications report. What are the technologies? How do they perform? How have they evolved? Agentic AI in the digital front door space, certainly coming up in many conversations. We're about to publish a vendor guide on that. If any of your listeners called me today, my headline would be, I know more vendors than customers of that. And I think that's changing. Ask me in 6 months and I'll have all kinds of performance data to share. But you think about the example of the percentage of patients calling in, or the percentage of calls rather, about scheduling. Well, agents can help with many of those things. And we tend to say things like, well, an agent can't solve everything, so we shouldn't do that thing. But patients are already using agents. I dare say your last airline flight, you probably engaged with some kind of AI tool at some level. Anyway, so I'm excited to go learn more about that. Agentic AI, we're also looking into contact centers as a service. It's just the next thing coming, and we're excited to go validate it.
I'll look forward to that report. I love reading all your reports in this zone. So to that one, maybe as a final question for you, Adam, is there anything that you learned, putting on the symposium that you could offer fellow organizers of events or people who maybe want to engage patients? Is there anything that you could offer us?
It's easy to talk about patients, but we need to talk with patients. If we're truly going to make this a priority in healthcare, they need to be present. They need to be part of the conversation. We did a pre-summit survey just to ask patients in general, what are some of your priorities? And they're talking about cost transparency. They're talking about these communication tools. As people create events, and your audience knows this, you have to know the needs of the customer. You have to understand them. You cannot put yourself in that seat. You must interview them, to be honest. What are their needs? What are their expectations? What are their behaviors? Yes, I have a Toyota truck, but I am not all Toyota customers. If I worked for Toyota, I would need to go ask and understand the market. Isn't it interesting? Something as critical as healthcare, make assumptions. Older patients can't use tech. That's a huge assumption that's incorrect. Or if we open up self-scheduling, all patients will incorrectly schedule the doctor's time. I don't believe that. Yes, there are guardrails we should have, but it's so important just to know your audience and make sure you're serving them.
I like that. That's great advice, Adam. And you're right. Like we shouldn't base our all patients on what our experience as a patient is, because that may
Right.
not be valid. And then also
Right.
we shouldn't stereotype in the good or bad way, right? To say, oh, these people do use technology in this way and these people don't. We've
Yeah.
always been surprised. I've always been surprised that the data that shows there actually isn't a big difference between, at least for healthcare, the use of technologies and things. So that's cool. Thank you for that. I'm going to put you on the spot though. When's the symposium next year? Are we going to see another one?
We're still in postmortem deciding where we go next, but one key learning of what we do next time is don't schedule it during Sway Health Live. Let's make sure those are separate times, because I want to be in the room and learn from you and your team, Colin. And so, yeah, more to come. We're excited to keep learning and sharing more. I think the mission of improving healthcare will always be present, so there's always got to be effort to do that. And so the answer is TBD, and we will share as soon as we know. But I encourage your listeners, be at Sway Health Live. It's not going to compete with this KLAS event again. Colin and I have already made sure of that.
Thank you. And yes, we're definitely not going to overlap next year. And yeah, when your news drops, let us know. We'll make sure we drop it to our audience as well. But
Thank you.
no, that's great. And thank you for the plug. I really appreciate that, Adam. Where can people go, Adam, if they want to connect with you or if they want to learn more about KLAS Research?
Yeah, our website is klasresearch.com, KLAS research.com. I would love to connect with any of your audience on LinkedIn. It's Adam Cherrington. And, I love what you put out there, and you're in such an abundant community. And I would love to connect by email as well, adam.cherrington@klasresearch.com. But people can find me on LinkedIn, and we'll connect there too.
Sounds great. And definitely encourage anybody who wants to have really good in-depth insights and conversations around patient experience, patient engagement, any form of technology really in the health space. Adam's a great guy to know and a good guy to connect with. And if you see him at a conference, make sure you stop and say hello to him.
Thanks,
Well, Adam,
Colin.
as always, a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you for the insights and for telling us a little bit more about the symposium and about the work that KLAS is doing.
No, the pleasure's mine. Thanks again. I really appreciate what you do.
I really want to thank Adam for joining me today. He always has great insights and information to share. KLAS Research occupies a unique spot in the healthcare ecosystem, so I really appreciate Adam's perspective. What I am taking away from our conversation is that great healthcare marketing doesn't start with messaging. It starts with listening. The smartest teams in healthcare have figured out how to literally put patients at the center of their marketing. I'm Colin Hung. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you on the next video.